Welcome back to another episode of Glasp Talk. Today, we are excited to have Ozan Irturk with us. Ozan is a brand strategist and the founder of Frontera, a consultancy that helps B2B SMEs with lean marketing teams build a differentiated brand that grows profitably. So, with a focus on positioning, differentiation, and profit-led branding, Ozan has been instrumental in guiding companies to stand out in the market, overcome revenue plateaus, and achieve effective marketing strategies. So besides consulting, Ozan also shares his branding insights through his writing, distilling strategies behind great brands to provide actionable advice. So today we will dive into his journey in branding, his approach to helping businesses differentiate themselves, and his insights on building a strong brand in competitive market. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So first of all, we'd like to know what inspired you to start Frontera and what challenges did you face in the early days of building your brand strategy consultancy?
So, what inspired me was purely curiosity. I followed what I like to learn about and basically what I like to think about. And it brought me to here basically. I started a brand strategy consultancy. But of course, in the early days, I was not sure about, hey, okay, I'm going to start a brand strategy consultancy, right? It started as a newsletter and a blog because I was sharing what I'm learning, especially related to mental models and how people make decisions. And again, I kept following my curiosity. And of course, one of the good things about building an audience is sometimes audience also leads you. And in that case, of course, my audience was asking me a lot of questions like, hey, we have this problem, like, how can we solve? And that's how actually it organically became a brand strategy consultancy. So that's how I basically navigated through that journey. The challenge was, of course, I had some personal changes in my life. So I had a corporate job at the beginning. I was a product manager, and I had to leave because of changing a city. And at that time, I was also starting with the newsletter, and I already had some audience. So the challenge was, hey, is it the right thing to fully focus on this, or actually should I go back and look for another job? So the challenge was that, but in the end, everything worked out fine, and I'm here.
Oh, yeah, awesome. And I'm curious, how did you get, you started newsletter, right? And you have newsletter and like really great content, we know and we love, by the way. And how did you get the first 1,000 followers or subscribers for the newsletter? Or first 1,000 or 10,000? Yeah.
So first 1,000, I think, came with a bit of like pushing through it, sharing the articles in different places. I started actually sharing them on Instagram, and then I was also learning about SEO at that time, like how can I grow it through SEO. But the first 1,000 came through Instagram, Reddit, and some articles went viral on Hacker News, especially that was a big one. Like 2, 3 articles in a couple of weeks went viral, and Hacker News, you get a lot of visitors in one day. And that's how I got the first 1,000.
I see. Was the blog about branding or positioning?
At that time, it was mental models, as I mentioned. So it was just a hobby, right? Like I had a full-time job, and I actually wanted to do something with what I've been learning, just because I liked it. And I was, again, learning about mental models, how people make decisions, how it affects actually buying, right? How people make purchase decisions. And as I was learning about this, I decided to write, and in the format of a blog and a newsletter. And again, I was also learning like how can I grow this, and it also taught me a lot about actually marketing my own business, and that was basically it.
Interesting. Yeah, but why did you choose Instagram? Because like newsletter is usually text format, but Instagram is a visual format, right? So yeah, some people, so yeah.
So at that time, Instagram was not like today, right? I mean, today it's much more, let's say, video based. But at that time, I mean, text and images were still popular, especially the carousel format. So I just knew it because of a previous project that I had, and I started there. And again, it worked fine for the beginning, very early days. But then I realized, of course, I mean, I had to do some other stuff. I then learned about how to grow a newsletter specifically. Besides SEO, of course, you know, I mean, newsletters also have a lot of specific growth platforms now. And I also discovered those. I also made a lot of cross promotions with other newsletters in the early days. And that's how I got the initial growth.
Interesting. Yeah, also like related to newsletter. So did you try to use other platforms, so not only newsletter, but also like Medium, so medium.com or Substacks or like other newsletter
No,
platforms?
Medium I tried for a while, but it was not effective. Substack never.
So you choose your domains and so starting newsletter.
Correct. Correct.
And when did you start it? Like, so the first one.
It was, I believe, after COVID 2020, like very early days. The idea, you know, I mean, we were in lockdown for a while, so I had a lot of time to think and do something different, like all of us. So I think it was after like initial days of COVID, end of that year, probably 2020.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, so as we mentioned, so we love your newsletter and we learn a lot. But so yeah, we're just curious, like, where is the resource or source of like your knowledge or information? So before writing a newsletter, you are probably so researching or like, writing, making a draft. So firstly, so where is the source of information you usually follow? And so where is the place? So you write a draft on newsletter.
So the source of information is basically everywhere, you know. Sometimes, I mean, I go for a walk, I see one new store open, for example, about a different product, and I say, okay, what is this? And I research it, and then it gives me a story to write about, right? Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes, of course, I mean, the most common one is books. I read a lot of books. I read a lot of articles, and that's the most common one. And of course, I mean, you know, if you want to write, you have to take a lot of notes. Like whatever you learn, you have to capture it somewhere, so that you can transform all these ideas into an article format later on. And that's what I do. I mean, I use everything I live, like any experience on the street or anything I read on a newsletter, in a book. I capture them and then I use those for inspiration later on. Again, as I follow my curiosity, it's not kind of a work for me. Like I like it. I like to dig deeper in these type of topics like marketing, branding, strategy in general. So I do it every day basically and every time.
I see, learning from everyday things, and that's awesome. And do you have any
Correct.
tools or notebook, to keep your ideas always? Do you carry notebook every day, every time, or do you take notes or mark upper notes, or
So for quick note taking, like from the example I just gave, let's say I saw something while walking on the street and I have to take it, I have to note it down, right? I just use Apple Notes. I mean, it's the quickest, it's the easiest. I don't have to categorize or anything. I just have one simple notes file, and I just put every idea there, very raw, like maybe the main idea, why I wanted to note it down, and also some details, and that's it. But after that, of course, I go through it on a regular basis, usually every a couple of days, and I put them into a structure, and I take all of these notes, especially the important ones, to Notion. And in Notion, I mean, before I had a much more complex note-taking system, but I mean, in time I learned the hard way that actually I have to keep it simple because otherwise I spend a lot of time. So I have on the Notion just two categories. One is about ideas, like let's say, for example, if I read about a specific strategy, let's say progress making forces, right? What is it? I want to research it, I want to read books about it, and I want to write it in the future. I note it down in the ideas section. But if it's a story, let's say a story about an advertisement campaign, right? I categorize it under the stories file. So I also keep another file for stories, and I have two basically categories. One is about ideas and the other one is about stories. That makes it very easy for me to, whenever I want to write an article, I just go through my stories file, I choose a story, and I match it with an idea and I write about it.
Interesting. Do you look back at, maybe you are keeping, notes for over 5 years, 6 years, then do you look back at, the old day notes, like, or stories you mentioned,
Always.
Okay.
And sometimes I even go back and read my own articles and newsletters because I mean, I get an idea that I actually forgot, and I remember. I sometimes get a story that I forgot, so that I can reuse in the future.
I see. Wow.
Because
That's awesome.
articles you
Yeah.
write are also notes, right? In the end,
Mhm.
very formatted, very polished, but they're also notes.
I see. Yes, that makes sense. And how about editing process? Do you edit a lot, or how long it usually take, when you write
That's
something?
I edit a lot. It's painful, Before I used to actually edit while writing, and I mean it was even more painful. But now I write the first draft like very raw. I just put down whatever I have in mind. Of course, still following a structure, but I allow myself to make mistakes. I allow myself to go into different directions. I finish the first draft and then I start editing. That way, it's much quicker, much easier, less painful. I usually publish after, let's say, I usually publish the fourth draft or something.
I see. And I mean, nowadays, anyone can access ChatGPT or Anthropic Claude and AI. So do you use AI for editing or fast draft, or do you have someone to review your draft to brush up your content, or you're working by yourself?
I use AI, but not for editing or writing. I use it for research. That makes research very quicker, and also for generating specific ideas. What I mean by that, for example, I wrote the article, let's say, and I have to choose a headline, right? If I don't have already a headline in mind, I go to ChatGPT or Cloud AI and I give it, of course, some directions and I generate a lot of headlines. And then I choose one, I edit myself again, and then I use it. So, first, for research purposes, and second, for generating very specific ideas.
I see. Do you ask someone to review your content before
No,
publishing? No.
no.
I see. Cool.
And
Yes.
I think this is like a evergreen question, but so when do you think it's ready to publish the newsletter or article? So yeah, you edit and you write and edit, but tomorrow, so you can re-edit, like, but at
You
some
can
point,
edit
yeah.
forever, right?
Yeah.
Forever, yeah.
When do you
Correct.
think it's ready? Yeah.
I feel like I have a feeling like, okay, this is good enough. I say, okay, this is good enough. This has I think I'm transmitting the idea correctly and it's simple enough. So I don't need to cut more things, because then I might remove some important points, and I don't want to do that. So it's a feeling, basically. Whenever I feel good enough, I publish. So I don't chase perfection. I mean, it can never be perfect, right? So whenever I feel like it's good enough, I publish.
And you mentioned that you will simplify in the editing process, right? As draft goes on,
Correct.
and you simplify and remove unnecessary. But and what criteria or what do you have in mind when you're editing? You said simplicity, right? And do you have any other elements you care about when you writing or editing in your process?
So I always think about, can I make the section shorter without changing any meaning? And also after like sections, I also go down to sentence level. Can I make the sentence shorter? And that's what I mean by simplification. Like if I can convey the same idea in a shorter, more concise way, I just do it. Because that's the way I also want to read, like whenever I read a book. If it's too complicated, like if it feels like work to me, I just stop reading. That's why, I also don't want to do the same. I want to do the same for my readers. It has to be as simple as possible. Like writing shouldn't come in front of the idea. Writing is just a tool to convey the idea, and it shouldn't feel like reading. You just have to read, and it needs to feel natural. So that's what I'm aiming, let's say.
I see. And I love the your writing actually, because in the Why Simple Brands Win in your article, and you mentioned that nobody has mental energy because there are people are busy and there's so many brands and people have no mental energy to figure out what's the brand stand for nowadays. So I think you really do that in your writing and editing process, and that's really impressive.
Actually, you also talked about like Why Simple Brands Win article. I mean, branding is also similar, right? Branding, messaging, and positioning. It's like simplifying the idea behind the brand to its core, like what truly matters, and also conveying that idea to the potential customers. So in that sense, I see similarities between just simplifying an article or simplifying the big idea behind the brand to its core, so that it can better get into customers' minds.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. And you said, having several average product, you should have really one strong product or service, not like dozens of average product or service. That really makes
Correct.
sense. And in that
Like you,
sense,
like Glasp.
thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, in that sense, in your experience, over the course of a decade or something, you're helping people and consulting people, companies, and what are the most common branding mistakes that B2B SMEs are making, and how they can be avoided?
So there are a lot, of course, but let's talk about the common ones. I mean, first one is imitating bigger competitors. So if you are starting a new brand, I mean, one of the worst mistakes you can make is just imitating what others are doing, especially what other big brands are doing, because they are big brands, right? They can just do some other stuff that a new brand cannot or should not do. And that's first mistake. Second is, so the first one is about differentiation. Second one is more about messaging. Like you cannot talk about a lot of things about your product, like a lot of benefits, targeting a lot of different target audiences, target customer segments. You just have to, going back to the simplicity point, you just have to have 3 core messages, or one coming from one big idea, 3 core messages, and you have to convey the same messages. You have to talk about the same messages in different ways again and again. If you repeat the same messages, of course, you can get into potential customers' minds, right? I see a lot of new brands are diluting their messages. They talk about different stuff, different benefits, different features, different products sometimes. And of course, it's the messaging then gets diluted and it's not effective. So that's another one. And the third one is just taking a lot of action without any strategy behind. So I see a lot of brands, for example, doing a lot of marketing activities. They publish on some channels, some social posts, they do some SEO work, they advertise, they do lots of things, but there is no strategy behind, right? There is no, let's say, a proper funnel, a proper machine or an engine that drives customers through one stage to another, and also taking, let's say, a holistic approach for customer acquisition. So all these random activities, yes, of course, they deliver some results, but they don't actually generate a lot of real value in the long term. So these are the three main mistakes I see, especially for new brands.
I see. And I remember I read, your art from your article that, like, the startups, new company try to copy not competitors, but, bigger companies like Apple, Nike or something like that. But they are so well-known brands so that they use really broad words, like meaning, oh, we are all in one place, something, but that doesn't mean anything at that
Correct.
moment. But now for the startup, like a company started, like new companies, and they need to be really specific, and that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned it, and yeah.
Correct. Early on, especially, I mean, it also applies to bigger companies, but especially early on, very simple message, very clear message, and also ideally a distinct attention grabbing message is very important for new brands.
Yes. Yes. And also you mentioned profit-led branding, right? Could you explain what profit-led branding means and how it differs from traditional branding approaches?
So it's about actually how people see branding. When I also noticed this myself, like when I speak with founders or executives, they think branding as design, colors, packaging, uh, type typography, and of course these are part of branding, but those come later, right? I mean, first you need the positioning, the messaging. Who are we going to target? What will be our strategy? So there is, let's say, a core piece of branding that's more important, that should come first before anything else, because in the end, those ideas define what will come later, right? Okay, if you are going to have a design, like you have to look at competitors first, like to be different, right? So that's what I call by profit-led branding. So the core idea behind the brand before going into the design, typography, and let's say the visual elements that are necessary, that has to happen, of course, but they come later.
So positioning
see.
and messaging. So you mentioned the first thing, so you are doing it.
Correct.
So is that right? Positioning. But so do you have like any frameworks or tips when you start like making a positioning or like messaging? Because I'm not sure like how to start with it. So if we are clients, so how do you start with it?
So
Yeah, well, not
of-
not us. Yeah, anybody or any SMEs for sure. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what we start is always actually with 3C analysis. I mean, it's kind of the basis of marketing. So you look at 3Cs: customer, competition, and the company. So you look at customer first to understand what they are trying to achieve, right? What is the real progress that they are trying to make? I mean, you are probably familiar with jobs to be done framework. So what are the functional outcomes that they are trying to achieve? What are the emotional ones? What are the social ones? And also, what are the blockers against achieving that outcome? So first is customer, second is company. We look at the company. In your case, for example, Glasp, you have some talent, you have probably some other team members, you have some capabilities, you have a product, you have an offer. For example, this podcast, which is an asset, you have a newsletter as well. So we look at the company, like what can be the competitive advantage of this company. This is the second C. And the third C is the competition. Then you look at the competition to understand what they are doing, what they are good at, what they offer, and what are the unmet needs. So what is that they are not providing to customers, so that actually we can differentiate against them and we can provide that value in a clear way. So this is, let's say, the basis of positioning. Only after looking at these three C's, you can decide on targeting, you can decide on how you are going to be different. You can choose the attributes that you are going to differentiate on. For example, are you going to differentiate on size? Are you going to differentiate on a feature? Are you going to differentiate on a specific value like Patagonia and sustainability? So there are, of course, a lot of attributes that you can differentiate on, but in order to decide on that, first you need to look at the customer, what they are trying to achieve. You have to know your competitive advantages, and you have to look at the competition to see what they're already providing well, so that you don't go there and you do something else.
I see. And at the same time, how can companies ensure their branding align with customers? I mean, or perception, their perception. I mean, should we do qualitative analysis or quantitative analysis? Or do you have some what metrics we should follow? What's the best way to ensure branding aligns with customers?
What do you mean by branding aligns with the customer?
So meaning like you mentioned like a positioning, messaging, etc. But that's from kind of expectation, right? I mean, you do research and analysis, but how do we ensure like then you consolidate to messaging, branding, right? Then, but over time, audience change, target change, and people change, and how can we make it sure that our branding fit with our right users, right customers? Do we have a metrics we should follow, or should we talk to users?
Of course, I mean, the qualitative and quantitative research, both are needed, right? But in this case, qualitative always performs better, because when you, especially if you know what questions to ask, where you need to go, where you need to dig deeper while customer is talking about explaining something. When I talked about jobs to be done, like the functional outcomes, the emotional outcomes, and the social outcomes, if you know what to ask to customer, you can always dig deeper and get to the core of their need. You can understand their world better, because again, in the end, they are trying to make a progress in their lives, and your brand has to fit into their world so that they buy, right? So in that sense, of course, you have to you need numbers as well, right? You need qualitative data as well. But in this sense, quality always performs better.
Interesting. Also, like just like curious about like messaging. So, what do you mean by messaging? So, you mentioned like three types of like bigger message or like middle message. Yeah, more like middle message you mentioned, and so three types of message. And so, how do you like test it out or like crystallize messaging so that it is conveyed to customers and it's appealing to customers or potential customers? Do you test like weekly, or how do you do it?
Yes, so messaging is not something to test actually, because again, when we analyze customers, company and the competition, but especially customers, we are already analyzing with the data we have, right? The knowledge, again, qualitative and quantitative. So messaging should also already come from that analysis. So actually, it's not something that you test. It's already coming from many tests you have done before, right? And when I said 3 core messages, of course, this is within the framework we use. We choose 3 key messages for a brand, and also 3 sub messages for each. And then we repeat all these messages across social media. It can be newsletter, it can be advertising, it can be a sales stack. You can take these core messages, let's say it's like 3 by 3 metrics, but 3 core messages in the end. One can be about a core benefit that you would like to highlight, for example, about Glasp. One can be about a value that you strongly believe in. And one might be the problem that you solve, that you want to highlight as a message, right? So you end up with a 3 by 3 matrix, and you repeat these across all the channels so that customers get what you are trying to, how you are trying to help them. And to your point about messaging, what is positioning? So positioning, I think I explained in the previous question. So positioning is in the end occupying a specific space in customers' mind relative to the competitors, right? So when we talk about, for example, Glasp, you explain it by saying a market category, and customers immediately think about alternatives. For example, they might be thinking Notion as your competitors, even though it's not actually your competitor. Maybe you don't see it that way, but they might see it that way, and they might be comparing Notion to Glasp. Or they might be comparing, for example, Glasp to their physical notebook or Apple Notes. So in the end, your direct competitor is not only other browser extensions, for example, but many other stuff that customers compare Glasp to. And you have to position Glasp also against those competitors. So you have to define how you are going to position it in their minds. And based on that positioning, you create your messaging. It's the 3 by 3 matrix that I mentioned. So you choose 3 core messages and you create 3 sub messages based on those. And then those are the messages that you communicate to the market.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's clear. And yes, thank you for telling your insights so into Glasp also branding. So yeah, actually this is so helpful and valuable. Yeah, and so
happy to hear that.
oh,
happy to hear that.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, so much valuable. Yeah. And so
yeah. Sorry. Okay. Nowadays, like AI is expanding, right? As we mentioned, like, people can use AI for writing, like a messaging, like a create content, like a video, create generative videos or audios. And I'm curious on how AI will impact the future of branding of companies. Will that helpful for companies? Yeah.
So I think execution work will get much cheaper. So for example, the design, right? Like I am sure in 5 years or maybe 10 years, let's say, you will be able to just open your favorite AI tool. You will be able to give some inputs, and you might get a full, let's say, branding, ready website design, ready colors, about your idea and everything, So the execution work will get much cheaper when it comes to branding. But again, we don't know yet. We haven't seen anything about the strategy part that, okay, AI can do also the strategy, analyze a company end to end, and also create a proper strategy to execute and win in a specific market end to end, right? It still requires experts. It still requires a lot of human insights, let's say. So I think that part will be harder to change in terms of AI. But of course, in the future, even that part might be automated and based on AI, and we might be also just looking for other jobs.
Okay. And this is another like a common question maybe, but personal brand versus corporate brand. So in digital age of marketing, social media, and how do you think is important for companies to build personal brand and versus like corporate brand? So meaning in some cases for new startups or new companies and building a new branding, like a new brand, corporate brand takes time. So that if the founders becomes, let's say founders or people working there becomes famous, through personal brand, and it's easier for people audience to how to say recognize the corporate brand, right? How do you think how how will it change over time, or is it or how, do you have some advice or tips in this question?
So I don't have any specific tips, but personal brand is also a brand, right? So it has to follow a similar, actually, core idea to build a personal brand. But it's just another layer. I mean, it doesn't replace corporate branding. Like you still, for example, of course, you follow a lot of personal brands, but you still want to buy a Rolex, right? Because it's the brand, it has some associations in our minds, and people want to pay for those associations and also, of course, the functional benefit, even though it's not that much in the case of Rolex, especially if you are not a diver or anything. People pay for the associations that it brings, right? People pay for the brand. And does Rolex have a personal brand that it uses? No. Coming to new brands, of course, I mean, if you already have a personal brand that you can leverage, go for it. It's a layer that you can use. But eventually, especially again, if you're not trying to just only sell courses and keep your personal brand as the main thing, eventually you will have to build a corporate brand, right? So that actually other people can also work for that brand and grow it. And it also takes its own, let's say, shape. So long story short, I see it as a new layer, which is useful because now everybody can be media companies. And I also agree that early on, especially, it's easier to leverage a personal brand, especially if you're starting from zero. But of course, long term, a corporate brand is needed, and a personal brand doesn't replace a corporate brand.
And so it related to like, long-lasting brands. So yeah, how should we keep or how can we keep like long-lasting brands? Like, because sometimes in the beginning, so this is very, so sophisticated or, elaborate brand that people want to buy or people want to use, but maybe 10 years or the brand identity was lost and somehow like, oh, this is kind of like cheap brand or yeah, no one want to buy it. Sometimes this happens, right? So do you have any tips or advice so to keep long-lasting plans? So internally for our company as well, like how should managers or management so keep it?
So actually, you summarized it perfectly. I mean, world is changing, right? Nothing is constant. So what I said at the beginning about 3C analysis, customer, company, and the competition, all these are dynamic. So customer needs and their words change. Your company changes. Maybe it grows. Maybe it doesn't grow and it stays the same. Maybe you lose some employees, you close a department, everything changes, right? And same with the competition. There are new competitors all the time. Some competition goes out of business. There are some new competition playing in a different way all the time. So you have to keep your eye on these 3Cs all the time. But of course, it's not something to do every week, every month, maybe not even every year, but depending on the business. For example, in tech, it's of course everything changes much faster. While, for example, for FMCG, you can be, of course, look at it like for a longer time horizon. But what I'm trying to say is you have to keep your eye on these three C's: customer, competition, and your company. And you have to align your brand based on those changes. Maybe you have to reposition your brand. Maybe you have to change your messaging depending on the changes, so that you can stay up to date.
Yes, services are important. But what really is the brand core identity, do you think? Is that like, mission of the company, or like, vision of the company, or like missions, story? So what is like internal, like most important thing for the brand?
I think the most important thing is, first, the problem you solve for the customers. Second, the associations that you have to build, you want to build. So mission, vision, all these are, of course, important, but I think they come later, and they are not so necessary, especially for early stage companies. The first thing is the problem you solve for the customer, basically the value you create. And the second is the associations that you want to build in the customer's mind.
And then,
So
sorry,
let me just elaborate on the associations, because I
yeah,
think I didn't explain it before. So, for example, Glasp, you have this podcast, and you are talking with different people, and you are trying to associate it with certain concepts. For example, knowledge, right? For example, note taking, knowledge management. So these are some associations that you have identified, of course, intentionally for Glasp, and you are trying to build it through this podcast, through your newsletters, by sharing, for example, the most liked articles that you found or your users told you. So associations are basically these, and in the end, these associations also differentiate Glasp and allow Glasp to occupy a space in your users and in your customers' minds. So that's what I mean by associations.
I see.
And thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and regarding to kind of long-lasting brand, and also brand, how to say, change over time, and so, the as we solved as a startup solved the one problem, then they want to, sometimes, company wants to become bigger so that they expand the business to either horizontally or deep into more like a complex question or problems, right? When they evolve, how to say, expand their business, what should we care about? How to say, should we have separate brand for one? But some company have conglomerate, right? A group company. So what's the best approach? What's the best way for companies to expand the business?
So it's called actually brand architecture, and there is no one right answer. It depends on the company, and it depends on the products and services that you would like to add to your offering, right? For example, to Glasp, if you would like to add a very similar tool but another extension, no problem. You could add it to Glasp brand, and maybe you have to redefine what Glasp stands for slightly. But in the end, it wouldn't change the meaning of the brand. Users would get it, and there wouldn't be any problem for Glasp. But some businesses, some brands decide to expand in a totally different area, sometimes totally unrelated to their core business. And that's when you have to be careful, like, should we add this to our existing brand? Should we use our existing brand equity for this new thing because it's a risk? Or should we just call it a new brand, like a totally different name, and just allow it to grow on its own? So it depends on what you stand for. So I talked about Rolex. So Rolex is a luxury brand, right? And the worst thing you can do for a luxury brand is to create a cheap line. So creating, let's say, Rolex Lite, it will destroy the brand. It will destroy the meaning of Rolex. So that's why they created Tudor, which is another watch brand that coming from Rolex Group, and they allowed it to just grow on its own. Of course, it's more inexpensive, but it didn't affect what Rolex meant for people. So that's the key point. Like, I think the question to ask yourself is like, hey, would it change what we stand for? Would it actually decrease our brand equity? Then you can decide on, for example, either calling it a new name, like a totally separate brand. You can call it a different brand, but say, hey, powered by Glasp, for example, or you can just put under Glasp brand and you can just go with it.
I see. But at the same time, sometimes I see, like the brand use the same name. Let's say Amazon. Amazon has marketplace, but at the same time, they have insurance, Amazon Music, Amazon TV, and so they use Amazon XYZ all the time. That's
correct.
Also, that I think that works, right? So, yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry. What's your thoughts
yes,
on this?
yes
Yeah,
and no.
yeah.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So it works. I mean, especially they feel like it works because it uses the brand equity Amazon has, right? But for example, YouTube is owned by Alphabet or Google, but YouTube is YouTube. For example, YouTube has a totally different place in your mind. Of course, I mean, you are in tech, you know that it's owned by Alphabet, you know it, I know it. But for a lot of people, YouTube is YouTube. It has different associations in people's minds, and it has a different place in your life, right? Again, some people might know that it's owned by Alphabet, some others might not, depending on their interest in tech world. But it has its own place. It's a brand on its own. So maybe Google Plus failed because of that. Because people associated it with Google and said, hey, Google's social network, I mean, no, I wouldn't use it. We don't know. So going back to Amazon, yes and no. Yes, of course, people see that it's from Amazon, and of course, they are more open to try it. But in the end, maybe that's why they are not so successful, or eating from Amazon's brand equity when they fail.
I see. Interesting. And sometimes I, hear that, people say, oh, I don't like Facebook. I don't use Facebook messages, but I use Instagram. I use WhatsApp. But by the way,
There you go.
both, they are owned by the
There
same
you go.
company, by the way. Yeah.
Instagram is cool. Facebook is not, right?
Exactly.
So for some people,
In
yeah,
their
for
minds.
example. Yeah, I see. Yeah. Interesting. And do you have any personal favorite brands? And I'm curious why. And
So I talked about Rolex, for example. Rolex, I mean, I like it as a brand because especially when I read about it, like when I learn about it, I see the intention behind every action that they took over the years to make what it is today, right? And for a brand strategist, it's of course very impressive what they've done. Apple is a classic example, but I mean, I have to mention, like, it's also again the Steve Jobs, and you can see that actually he still lives like in Apple world, like his mind, his intentions, his desire, his principles, is still keeping Apple like what he desired. So Apple is another brand, and what else? I mean, I have a lot, but yeah, these are, let's say, the ones that come to my mind for now.
Nice. Is that do you like them because of your professional, or do you personally like the brand? I mean,
Both.
because you both. Okay.
Yeah. As I said, Rolex, I mean, I like it because I've seen the intention. Like it was by design, right? They're what they are today by design. Like they intentionally designed today's Rolex, and that's impressive, and that's why I like that brand as a brand strategist. But also, yeah, I like Apple because of their products, and I also, again, coming from what Steve Jobs designed for Apple.
I see. And have you considered, working for the company to help the brand? Because now you're a brand strategist, right? You help many people, many founders as a how to say in kind of individual contributor. But have you thought about joining, let's say, Rolex and help their brand or part of the brand? Have you considered about it? Or you prefer working outside and
No, I prefer being independent. I mean, that also allows me to see different companies, which is something I like, learning about different companies, what they do, how they do it, their competitive advantages, their competitors, how they can differentiate. So it's, in the end, it's problem solving, and I like it, and I like to solve more problems. While going into just one business and staying there, it gets, of course, a bit repetitive over time. So that's why I prefer being independent in that sense.
I see. That makes sense. Yeah. So, sorry, time is running out. But so you gave us a lot of, and also our audience a lot of, advice and lessons, and you learned throughout your life and experience, but careers. But do you have any more advice to, let's say, to entrepreneurs or business owners starting a company nowadays these days?
So one advice I can give is actually something we talked about, the power of focus, especially for a new business, right? By a new business, maybe new is not the accurate term, but I should say an early stage business. The focus is what matters, like the focus on the target customer segment, a specific one. Focus on your message. Focus on probably one or two marketing channels that work. Because if you try to do a lot of things, if you try to communicate a lot of messages, if you try to go to many different channels, in the end it doesn't work. It dilutes your activities, it dilutes the power of your message, and in the end it doesn't get into customers' mind. Because again, we talked about Facebook and Instagram. I mean, today customers are busy, right? Their minds are busy. Like, we see a lot of reels. How many reels do we see? Like, on average, probably we see a lot of videos, articles, YouTube videos, short form videos. So they are busy, and they don't want their mind to work more to understand your message. So that's why focus on your positioning, focus on your message, and also focus on your marketing channels, I think, is an advice that I can give.
And also focus on focus. I think that matters it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, great advice. And so this is the last question, but since Glasp is a platform where people can leave what they are reading, learning as a digital legacy, and we want to ask you, what legacy or impact do you want to leave behind for future generations? So it's a big question.
Wow, that's a really big question. Okay, so legacy, I don't believe in legacy so much, but of course it exists, right? I mean, we still, for example, we talked about Steve Jobs in this call. It's his legacy. But did he do all these to leave a legacy? Or did he do all these because that's what he believed in? That's what he wanted to do while living? So that's the way I see it. Like, I don't do anything for building a legacy. I just do it because, again, that's my curiosity. I follow it, and it allows me to do good work for me. And if some people appreciate it, that's great. If I can help some people, some businesses, some brands, by following my curiosity, that's perfect. And if some people read and like my articles, again, it's a side benefit. It's perfect. But I'm not doing it to leave a legacy. Again, if some people if my friends and my family talk about me positively after I'm gone, that's already a big win. All the rest is, let's say, a side benefit.
Yes, really beautiful. Yes, answer. And thank you again. Yeah, and thank you so much for taking time today. We really enjoyed the conversation and learned a lot from your experience.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.